So last week on Brexit Day, we had an email at Save British Farming from Jacob Rees Mogg's editor inviting me onto his show to talk about Brexit on Brexit Day. I mean, quite frankly, I couldn't think of anything better than going on GB News with Rees Mogg and busting Brexit to bits. But sadly, I was not able to make it as I was out of the country. And so luckily, one of our farmers, David Catt, was able to stand in for me, and he did an absolutely brilliant job at busting Brexit. And in a minute I'll play the clip. You might have seen it because it's been shared widely anyway on social media. But David did an absolutely brilliant job of holding Jacob to account, despite the fact that Jacob continually tried to talk over him, and even at the end started to try and find a benefit in the reality of farmers having to turn to growing grapes for wine as a new business venture, when it clearly is something that farmers are being pushed to out of necessity rather than demand.
And I'm joined now by farmer and wholesaler David Catt. Good evening, Mr. Catt. Thank you very much for joining me. Will you be joining me in celebrating the 4 years since we departed from the EU?
No, not whatsoever. None whatsoever. Hasn't benefited British agriculture one iota. In fact, it's damaged us. It's destroyed our ability to export to the EU. We had built massive trade with beef and sheep, lamb, fish, dairy products, which now we're not allowed to sell. We can't sell to the EU because of the red tape. We've got new checks coming in tomorrow. We've got new checks coming in tomorrow, which have been deferred 5 times, which will put the restrictions on.
Those are checks on imports, though, not on exports.
Yeah, but our exports, our exports stopped in 2020.
But you can still export to the EU under the TCA that we did with the European Union.
The paperwork and red tape involved, it makes it prohibitive financially.
Overall, our exports have grown to the EU since we left.
That's down to gas.
Well, it's not entirely down to gas, actually. It's also other aspects.
But the bulk of the exports are gas, yes.
No, gas is important, but actually our exports have been doing well, not just with the EU, but globally.
Too much on the Russians.
And we've had a protected market for EU agricultural produce, which has been hugely to the disadvantage of British consumers. We've had higher prices because we have been a captive market for the EU, and we can be more competitive, and our farmers can be more competitive. And as we open up free trade deals with other countries, there's a chance for you to export to them.
Inside the EU, we had protections of the CAP, which was a food policy. Outside of the EU, we have no governmental food policies. You cannot.
Farmers hated the CAP.
Food policy.
Every farmer I ever spoke to loathed the CAP, the constant regulation, the interference.
No.
And half the directives that are still affecting farmers are from our membership of the EU.
The CAP guaranteed a food supply at a known cost over the last 30 or 40 years because it guaranteed supply. We are in a situation in this country at the moment where agriculture and farming is falling off a cliff. In Kent, here, the Garden of England where I am, apple trees are being grubbed at a far faster rate than ever before. We're planting vineyards. We can't get any labour. Well, the labour we can get now comes, instead of from Europe freely, it comes from Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, all around the world on visas, which are very expensive, create a lot of red tape. So most farmers, fruit farmers down here, are packing up. We're planting vineyards.
The growth of vineyards has been doing extremely well. Farmers have been making a lot of money out of vineyards and increasing the value of their land as well. That's been a real positive.
Yeah, but it's only in its initial stages at the moment. But they're having to go there. A lot of established fruit farms that have been fruit farms for 50 years are finished.
Markets are developing, and the regulations on wine are being eased to make it more competitive and less regulated. This is a real opportunity that we couldn't have in the EU.
No businessman puts a barrier between itself and its biggest customer. Does not happen. Does not happen.
But our biggest customer is the United States. Our biggest single trading partner is the United States, not the EU. Not any individual country in the EU.
not for foodstuffs. We're now left at the vagaries of the supermarkets who dictate the prices. And they're
But the
pushing things
farmers
down.
said
Now,
that
friends of mine,
the farmers were always complaining about the supermarkets when we were in the EU. That's no change.
Yeah,
it's exactly the same.
Because the government policies allowed them to be where they are on the continent. They're controlled to a much greater degree than they are here.
Well, thank you very much, David. It's good of you to join me. But I'm now joined by Nick.
As Brexit progresses, it's getting harder and harder for these Brexiteers to defend it. And more people are waking up to the fact that Brexit is seriously bad for Britain. The thing to remember, though, is that it's not a status quo. Every day that Brexit is here, things will get worse for Britain. Brexit will never be done.